So first of all, I feel like a terrible friend. I did not know it was your birthday this past week.
Yeah, Friday.
Friday, man. Well, happy belated birthday, first of all.
Thank you.
Do you feel another year wiser, older? Got any gray hairs popping up? What's going on there?
Buddy, I've had gray hairs. When you own a business, they start kind of coming up more often than not. No, I mean, as far as wiser, so it's kind of weird because as you get older, I mean, usually people say you get wiser, and I'm all for that. And it's weird though because, I've had a lot of personal stuff that I've dealt with, years and years of and everything, but it's weird now that I'm 29. I'm not 30 yet, but I'm 29. But I kind of have like this different outlook. Because like when people have like New Year's resolutions, they're like, oh, it's a new year, new me kind of thing. I'm not one of those people that usually has. Like, I mean, I have goal setting for work and just things that I want to do in life. But it's different when you've had so much stuff happen in just a couple of years like I have, that now I'm like, okay, I'm 29 years old. This is now the time where it's like, okay, like I'm flipping that switch now where like, and I've kind of had this mentality, but I've never really like thought of it like this, but I'm just ready to see what's going to happen now. Like I have a lot more insight on a lot of things. I have a lot more wisdom that I'm carrying into this new age that I'm at. And a lot of people might think it's cheesy, but I mean, that's just how I feel because I've got a whole different group of people that I've been hanging around with, and it's just I've got a whole different outlook on life and just the perspective of life and just kind of just how things are going. And I try not to let a lot of things just really bother me. I mean, am I where I want to be financially? No, but I'm here. Eventually things will happen. I'm just putting in the work and just doing things as I go along, and eventually things will happen. But I mean, I'm excited to see what 29 holds for me. I'm excited to see what this next year holds for me, for us, and just really for anything that we've got going on. I mean, a lot of the stuff I started before this is just the foundation, and so I'm ready to see what's going to happen now.
Yeah, no, you took the words out of my mouth. You're laying the foundation. That's what it is. You're starting to understand what that foundation needs to look like, at least for the next upteenth amount of time. Like, I don't know what that next chapter looks like, but it's definitely like a new chapter, a new season, a new quarter of life, whatever that is. I mean, so we're recording this. It's a Sunday night, March 31st. Who knows? This could be the last year of your life too, because we got that. I was about to say full moon. I'm totally going blank on the term. The solar eclipse. Thank you. The total solar eclipse. It's on April 8th, I believe. It's a Monday.
April 8th.
We may not even make it to after that. So who knows? Enjoy 29 while it lasts, because that may be all you get.
Yeah. And it's funny though, because when it comes, like, they have like this, I've seen articles about this. I think we've kind of talked about this too, like way back in the day, but you have different stages in life, like your 20s, you tend to make a lot of like dumb decisions from like 20 to 25. You spend a lot of unnecessary money on things that you don't need, maybe a little bit older than that, but in your 20s, you're going to make a lot of dumb decisions financially and stuff. But I think that once you kind of hit like that 29 to 30 and then going into your 30s, you kind of start realizing like, okay, now it's really the time to like, let's start planning, let's start getting stuff implemented. Like, let's start kind of figuring out a game plan for how we want to go. I've already kind of done this a little bit, but now that I'm 29, I'm like, okay, the rest of this year, I need to really like, get things set in motion, get the plan set out, kind of, and I don't really hardcore plan a lot of stuff anymore. I'm kind of just like I've been so focused with work that whatever happens. So it's like, I just go with it, man. Like that's pretty much all I do. And like you said, I mean, depending on how this year goes, this very well could be the last year, but if it is, then at least I got to do something that I enjoy, that I'm passionate about, and it is what it is. But, if this is not the last year of our lives, then, well, I'm going to continue on and just, be grateful and thankful that I've been allowed to have another year of life and that I can hopefully be an impact on other people's lives,
So well said. I mean, we're going to jump into talking about Bigfoot and cryptids here in a second. But before we do, I want to get you on the record just because not next time, but the time after we record, we'll know if who was correct and who wasn't. Do you think something out of the ordinary will happen during this total eclipse on April 8th, the year of our Lord 2024? It can be a simple yes or no. You don't even have to say what that is, but do you think something out of the ordinary will happen?
The normal person to me wants to say no, but there's just too many things that are kind of going in motion right now for me to say no. Now, do I think ordinary can really be a lot of different things, but I think something might happen because there's a lot of places that are going to have a heavy population of people. I mean, they're bringing in the National Guard. Like, there's a lot of different things in motion now. I'm pretty sure if you've been on Facebook, you've probably seen the posts and stuff like that, the biblical stuff that talks about the solar eclipse and everything. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a believer of Jesus. Like, I believe that Jesus died for my sins kind of thing, but...
It is Easter. We are recording this on Easter Sunday.
Yeah, it is Resurrection Sunday. And so a lot of people were talking like, oh, there's too many things that are adding up right now, but they're also, too, not looking at it as like a broad thing because there's a couple other things that would need to happen before Jesus actually does come back that aren't mentioned in those posts on social media. Now, do I think it's going to be anything biblical? Probably not. Do I think it's going to be something that, and I'm not going to go into politics here, but do I think it's going to be something that's going to just take everyone's mind off of what's going on actually in today's society? I give it like a 75% chance.
75% chance. Okay.
Just because it's an election year. There's always stuff that's happening, and this being the first one, you haven't seen anything else hardly on social media besides that. And so we'll see what happens.
That is.
What about you?
Similar mindset that you have. I think the rational side of me is like, no, it's going to be just a once in a lifetime experience, just to be able, especially because we're in Texas and we're in that line of totality, as they call it, where it'll basically look like midnight around, I think, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, if I remember correctly. Rational brain says, nah, it's just going to be a normal total eclipse, whatever normal means for that. But like you said, there's a lot of weird things going on. There's always weird things going on, but it feels as though if something were to happen, this would be a very convenient time for something to happen.
While we're kind of like talking about it, like, does this, just this year as a whole, not because that it's an election year, and don't worry, y'all, we are going to get into our topic, but does this year feel just odd to you? Like there's something in the air, like something, not like, I don't want to say like 2020 or COVID, but like, does it just feel like this year is different?
I wouldn't say that the year feels different. What I think feels different, and I'm not sure if this is just because of the age I am now or the amount of access to information we have now, but I feel as though this is the first time that this country, the United States of America, is a little bit off the rails, more so than ever before. Maybe not so ever before, because you could go all the way back to 1776, and there's probably some wild times that happened, the War of 1812, things like that, but at least in the modern era, it just feels like everyone is asleep at the wheel. And I had this revelation, actually, and this could be like a whole podcast conversation of itself, but if you go back to like the formation of a lot of our government agencies, and what I mean, the 3-letter agencies like the CIA, FBI, NSA, things like that, those that have to do with the security state. A lot of those came to be in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? They really came of age around that time period. That's only about one person ago. If you think about the time span of someone's career, that's about a person and a half ago. And so what's really hit me recently, and this is just from listening and watching other podcasts and just people talking about, usually it's a lot of people at the tail end of, in the twilight of their years. So like they're retired, maybe they worked in government, maybe they haven't, but they talk about their experience. They talk about how we're seeing all the guys and ladies who laid the groundwork in these organizations who have now come to pass or retired. And I wonder, like what information did they have with them that they're not passing along to the next generation or the next cohort of employees they have at these organizations? And just like, I don't know. I look at people that are our age, and there's definitely a lot of really smart, intelligent, articulate people our age. But I feel as though, like, if you're stepping into some high pressured role in a 3-letter agency, and the person that had the role before you didn't adequately get you up to speed on the who's who and the what's what, you're not going to be able to do that. Or you are going to be able to do it, but your own version of it, and it's going to be a completely different flavor than what you came to know.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, like, and this counts for things like White House administration, things like that. So I just wonder, like, we're at a handoff here. The boomer generation, if we want to call them that, the tail end of that generation is finally handing off the baton. But who are they handing it off to? And I wonder, are we actually going to see that handoff? Or is it just going to be a train wreck?
Well, I mean, real quick before we start, I mean, tagging onto that, I mean, you have your Gen X right before your millennials. I mean, you have your boomers and you have your Gen X. Now, Gen X, let's just, like, our parents, for example, I mean,
I'll preface, my parents are definitely boomers. I have older parents than typical. Like, my dad was born in 1952.
Okay, see, my parents were born both 1966, December 1966. Both of them. My mom's a week older than my dad, so they're both. I don't know the exact. I can't remember the exact age of both my parents. I know that sounds bad, but they're both the same age. I know what year they were born, but anyways, so it's like my parents definitely, I don't believe, are boomers by any means. I think they're Gen X, if I'm not mistaken. Me and my brother are both millennials, so it's like, realistically, it's like, is it going to skip the Gen X and go to the millennials? And because, I mean, unless you've already been set up for success, I mean, it's kind of hard to attain that when you're already a certain age, I feel. Or, I mean, it really depends on how you look at the age. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with that. I kind of feel like there's a shift happening, and hopefully it's a shift for the better. We're going to know. But either way.
Yeah. So let's start off with a very simple question, because we're going to be talking about Bigfoot. So I'm just curious. It could be a simple yes or no. You can dive whole hog in if you want, but do you think Bigfoot exists today, March 31st, 2024?
I was about to answer to you immediately. We're like, not today. I was like, So there's going to be, I feel like there's obviously, like, you've seen videos. Like, do I think he exists today? Probably not. Do I think he did exist? Yes. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any scientific research, obviously. Like, I'm not those people that kind of go out and research and then look for, like, the giant footprints in the ground and everything. But do I think he existed at one time? Yes, I do. There's so much weird stuff in our world for there not to be anything similar to that, for nothing like that to exist. And we've seen some pretty weird stuff in our time, in just our time alone, but just over time though. What about you?
I don't think it exists today. I think it might have existed at one point, though, within very recent or near history. And I could be wrong, because I'll lay out some theories as to why or how I think it existed at some point in near history, but I don't think it exists today. It's really interesting, because I heard you even bring up the word video, how there's videos of it, right? I've heard or watched videos that have, like, audio recordings of, like, a Bigfoot yell. It's kind of interesting. I don't know what those actually are, to be honest with you. The one thing I think it's really interesting that I came across a couple of years back when AI started coming to video was, so that original, like, Bigfoot video that got really popular I put in my notes, was it the 70s?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1967. It was called the Patterson-Gimlin film. And basically, it's that, like, for those listening or even watching, I'm not going to put up on the screen because it's technically copyrighted, but it's that infamous video of Bigfoot, supposedly Bigfoot, walking through the forest. In particular, it was in Bluff Creek, California. And it has the whole, like, big swinging arms, hairy man in a costume type look to it. And what I thought was really funny was because the emergence of artificial intelligence, and what I mean by AI is you can stabilize video now pretty easily. And because that footage was so shaky, you didn't really pick up on just how bad of a mockery or a spoof it was. And when you stabilize the video, you're just like, oh yeah, that's just like a dude walking. Like, it's very easy to see, but it's because you had to stabilize the video, which they could not have done to that degree 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe or 2000s. I don't know. Maybe Hollywood could have done something like that, but I thought that was interesting. I don't know where I was going with that, to be honest with you, but I heard you say the word video, and I was like, aha, I have a fun fact about that.
I mean, and that's interesting, though, because it could be, I mean, if AI can be used to, like, really enhance those videos, then, I mean, who knows, maybe, I'm surprised really nobody's tried to take those older videos that people were like, oh, it's all blurry, you can't even tell, it's probably just someone in a costume. I'm surprised they haven't really tried to use AI to, fix those videos or to bring them up to speed in today, what today's video would look like, to see if it actually is something that's true. Now, I will say some of those videos do look pretty real. I'm going to be the first one to say it. A lot of people are probably like, oh, you don't know what you're looking at. But there's so many videos out there that it's hard to, unless you actually have that hard evidence, it's hard to kind of tell. Now, what would kind of make me believe that it's not real is the fact that someone was able to just stand there and just video this entity without it doing anything, because first of all, we don't know what it acts like, like compared to, like, let's just say a grizzly bear. People know how they would react to human beings, so you pretty much would keep clear of those. Now, if you take your picture or your average picture of what Bigfoot would look like, I mean, you're looking at, like, what, minimum 8 feet tall, like probably 400, 500 pounds. Like, that's the size of a grizzly bear, only walks on 2 feet instead of 4. So there's that, honestly. Like, people would really have to know the patterns of it, but it'd be kind of hard for me to believe that someone is just randomly taking a video of this thing that's just walking around that, you couldn't tell.
Yeah. Now, I have a couple of theories that we can dive into here in a bit, but I'm kind of curious. One of the things I was interested in before we hopped on to talk was, like, how far back does, like, the myth or, like, the lore of what we consider Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if you want to call it that, like, how far back does that go? And I thought it was kind of interesting. A lot of it goes back to, like, early Native American, like, oral tradition. And I couldn't really find anywhere to where it was like someone pinpointed and said, like, this was the first moment when it was recorded in history. It was just in the oral tradition of Native American tribes in the Pacific Northwest in particular, which is interesting because whenever I think of, at least nowadays, like, if you turn on the Discovery Channel, they have, what's it called, Finding Bigfoot, and they have all these TV shows where the joke is they never actually find it, but there's always a new season where maybe they'll find it. And you always see them in places that I'm sure they started in the Pacific Northwest, but you see them looking in, like, Oklahoma, Georgia, like, other places that the myth didn't come out of. So I think that's really interesting. Like, did you know that, like, that's where the myth came from, was, like, the Pacific Northwest? Like, Oregon, Seattle, Washington.
Yeah.
There.
So I didn't actually know that the myth started up there. Now, I can see Oregon, Washington. It's kind of hard for me to see because, I mean, when I picture Seattle, Washington, I mean, I still think about Washington as, like, majority of it is city, but then I remember that there is a state, a national park up there, I think.
It's very, very foresty still.
Yeah. So I will say, though, like, so compared to, like, obviously where the 70% of the planet is covered in water, but we haven't even come close to discovering, like, I think it's like 10% of what's actually out there. Now, when you compare that to land, and just land mass, I'm not going to say we've discovered every inch of our, our country and every country, you know, because like you have to think though, there's other countries out there, like let's just say Canada, for example. There's a lot of uncharted territory in Canada that's not discovered that is actually in the middle of nowhere. And some areas you have to actually drive up and around certain other areas to actually get to like civilization, to get to a hospital, to whatever the case may be. So there's probably a decent amount of uncharted territory in our country alone, not just Canada and other connecting areas that has yet to be discovered. So
interesting. From your own perspective, where do you think Bigfoot would be? Because you I guess, acknowledge that you think it existed at one point. Maybe it exists today. Where do you think it would be? Or do you think it's multiple places? Like, do you think it's exclusive to parts of the U.S.? Do you think it's in other parts of the world? And I ask that because, like, the myth of Bigfoot, it exists in other parts of the world too. Like the term, I wrote them all down in the notes. So you have the Yeti in the Himalayas. You have the Yowie or the Yowie. It's Yowie in Australia. And there's other parts of the world that have their own version of that myth. Bigfoot and Sasquatch is what we call it stateside. But you only think about, and maybe that's because, like, you know, we're in the U.S. and, you know, no one really internationally travels to go find Bigfoot from our point of view. But, like, do you think it's an international thing? Like, do you think whatever that is around the globe? Do you think it's exclusive to places?
To me, it would make sense for it to be around the globe, considering that, I mean, a lot of different cultures have what their form of Bigfoot actually is. Now, looking the same, they're not. I mean, obviously, if you've seen movies and stuff that have been about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I mean, Bigfoot's typically like your brown to your black. Your Yeti's going to be white because it's going to exist in snowy areas. So there's different variations of what it actually is. Now, what's interesting, though, is it may not even be, how do I word this to where it doesn't, so
it may not be the same thing, but similar enough in different parts of the world.
That, but also, too, what if it actually does exist, but it just exists in one specific area by what the other place is, and it's known for? So let's just say, you know, like the Yowie, obviously it's based in Australia. What if it only actually exists in Australia, but we just know it as Bigfoot because that's just another term that could be used for it? That's kind of what I was inching towards. Now, as far as like your other question, asking about if it exists, like, you know, where I would assume that it would be at in our country, the Rocky Mountains are the ones that go like through Colorado and stuff.
Yeah.
Correct. I would assume it would kind of be along that stretch. Like it wouldn't be in a desert anywhere. It would be somewhere where it has the ability to have like shelter, you know. So I would probably pick like anywhere from Colorado up to Montana or like Wyoming or something like that, or even potentially in the foresty parts of Washington or Oregon. But it would be somewhere kind of like it kind of curve up into the country a little bit.
I think that's why those myths came out of the Pacific Northwest, because they're covered with thick, dense forests up there. Mm-hmm. Like it's a very, dare I say, moist part of the country. Mm-hmm. One thing I think that's kind of interesting is, have you ever heard the theory that really what Bigfoot or Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever you want to call it, could have just been like the remnants or the leftovers of like an ancient mammal that doesn't exist today? Have you heard that?
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking also, because if you really think about it, like I said, like what I mentioned before is that there's been so many different animals or so many different things that just don't exist anymore. But it's funny though, because they're slowly starting to like discover like new species of animals that are direct descendants of what those used to be. Now again, like, could Bigfoot be a descendant of something that existed many, many years ago? Quite possibly. Is there anything that's recorded in history about it? I couldn't tell you.
What if I told you we have a theory of what that mammal potentially was or still is.
What you got for me?
So one of the theories that kind of fascinates me, it's the Gigantopithecus descendant theory. So there was a mammal known as Gigantopithecus. I'm going to stutter the word. Gigantopithecus. We have fossil remains of this. Primarily, we found them in and around like China and India and Vietnam. So kind of like the eastern side of the Asian continent. I guess the southern side too, if you want to throw India in there with it. From what we know from the fossil records, Gigantopithecus existed around 9 million to 100,000 years ago, within that time frame. What we do know, so this was like an ape. So the genus type of this mammal was an ape. From what we understand, it could have been the largest primate to have ever existed. Now, like you said, we still continually find things all the time. Like, history is constantly being rewritten. But as of now, this could theoretically be one of the largest mammals, primates that had ever existed. From what we know, they ranged anywhere from like 9 to 10 feet tall, and they could have weighed all the way up to 2,600 pounds. So the theory could be that it is like a leftover or still existing Gigantopithecus that still exists in parts of the globe. So there's a lot of theories here, but think about the way like humans have evolved over time as well. They're based on where you live in the world, that could dictate how your body structure and the way you act and behave and things like that. Mm-hmm. If you had Gigantopithecus existing on different continents with different climate types, you may have similar differences to how we experience other mammals with their subtle differences, whether that be fur color, temperature, adaptions, things like that.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know.
That's actually a good point, because then it kind of makes you really think, like, if that you would assume then that Bigfoot is it would be a member of the primate family then at that point. Like, it would be a primate or considered that. Now I know that most primates, because I was actually looking that Gigantopithecus up just to kind of see what it looked like.
It's big.
And it is a large mammal. If anyone out there is listening and you want to know what this is, just Google this. Like, you can type in half of it and it'll auto fill for you and you'll be able to look at it. But it realistically looks like kind of what you would picture Bigfoot to look like. Now, they've got certain depictions that obviously make it look more just like a gorilla or something of the sort, but then you get some of them where you're actually looking at like this 10-foot tall ape looking, creature that, is just, it would be very intimidating. Now, whether or not it actually still exists today could be. Now, you really also have to think about it. I don't know what the most recent footage of Bigfoot is that's out there. I know there's been plenty of videos in the past, but if there is a significant decrease in video of it, then that possibly could lead into that theory. Like, maybe it was a descendant of that, or maybe it was a part of that family, and now they're just not here anymore. Because obviously, I don't know how Bigfoot, how they get it on and do their stuff, and reproduce and everything. But
well, Riley, you see, when one Gigantopithecus loves another Giganto.
I get that part, but it's like, is it like, most mammals do, or is it just, because you have to think, you never see them in pairs. Like, you never see them in pairs, which is kind of like, what I was saying about. It's like, are you going to have some like baby Gigantopithecus like just running around out there, like a Gigantopithecus has a bunch of children running around out there, and all of his lady friends are vying for child support or something, like,
no, it's a good point.
But it's like, if there were more of them around, then like people would obviously know. So it's like, if it's a descendant, then it would be kind of hard to really pinpoint that as far as what it would actually be. Like I said, I mean, the theory of it being not being this, but actually just being what we know as Bigfoot today. So
I still love the idea of Gigantopithecus having to pay child support to his giganto baby mama. No, yeah. So two things that kind of came to mind. The first one, this is kind of quick, is I think this is an interesting theory because from at least like the origin of this myth and the lore behind Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Also, fun fact, when I was looking it up, I put in the notes, Sasquatch, the word itself is from Native American languages, particularly from Alcomelum, the word Sasquatch or Saskets, meaning wild man or hairy man. Interesting. It doesn't really relate to what I'm about to say, but just throwing that out there for people listening. It makes me wonder, though, since the origin of this theory goes back to like oral traditions from Native American tribes, there could be a scenario where we don't know how far back that oral tradition goes. Let's say it goes back, I don't know, let's be generous. Let's say like 1,500 or 2,000 years, right? That's not too crazy to think about. Like we don't know what was happening really on this continent to a certain degree 2,000 years ago, but we know people were probably here doing something. They could have ran into one of the last remnants of it then, maybe the last tribe of it, whatever it was, because you're right, you have to have a male and a female if it's a mammal to reproduce. So, I mean, if you just run into one today, there has to be another of the opposite sex, or else this is not reproducing. That's the end of the bloodline right there.
Right.
So it could be that they ran into one 2,000 years ago, and then through oral tradition, it carried on. And, you know, the forest is spooky. You see things, and, you know, the tradition stays alive that way. But on the flip side of that, I was going to Google. I can't remember this guy's name. There's been a guy who's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of times. He's been on other podcasts too. He's like a legitimate explorer. Like he goes deep into the Amazon. He goes deep into like India and Thailand and all these places and tries to find these animals that people say don't exist anymore, but there's like urban legends within those tribes and communities that show it still exists. And he goes in there and sometimes he's able to find them. And it's really interesting. Like he found, hang on, I'm going to butcher like some of these examples, but like there was like a mega leopard he found in the middle of, I think it was the Amazon. But he was talking about this one example where a tribe claimed that there still was like a dinosaur that was still living like in their area. I'm drawing a blank on where this was because I didn't think to even reference this until about 30 seconds ago. But he said there was so much anecdotal evidence amongst this tribe that this dinosaur still existed that he was going to give time and effort to go see if he could find it, because he's had luck trying to find other things. And it makes you wonder, like, if there's a slight possibility that what we would consider to be a dinosaur that's not like an alligator or crocodile is still out there alive, was to not assume that within the last 1,000 years, Gigantopithecus could have still been around to some degree.
Right. I mean, that's actually a good point, because it's, if there's the evidence that supports it, then by all means, like, I'm for it. You know, like if it's just doing its thing, just living in the wild, I just say just leave it alone. Like, you know, at the end of the day, just do your research, post about it, say, hey, like I made this discovery, awesome, cool, have your pictures, all that kind of stuff. If you survive that encounter, because obviously, you know, anyone can say like, oh, I've seen this, I can prove it's real, I've had contact with it. But if you don't know, again, kind of goes back to what I said earlier, if you don't know how it's going to react to you, then why would you anticipate that? It's just like, you know how a tiger is going to react to you, but yeah, and you're not going to approach it. But yeah, you have this being that stands 7 to 10 feet tall that you're like, I'm going to walk up to that. So it's like,
yeah. So the guy I was thinking of, his name was Forrest Galante.
Okay, so I was looking it up, and that was one of the names that popped up. I just didn't know if that was the guy or not.
Yeah, he's an American wildlife biologist, outdoor adventure, and television personality. He's done like a bunch of shows and stuff, but I just remember he was on like Joe Rogan's podcast a number of times, and he was always talking about like, you know, if you have enough anecdotal evidence, there's some truth to whatever that is. Right. I'm not saying everything's true if someone says it's out there, but it makes you wonder, at some point in time, Bigfoot, whatever that was, probably was stomping around somewhere. Or let's assume let's assume Gigantopithecus was not a thing on this continent within that time period. Were there monkeys that existed there that don't exist today? You know, like there had to have been something that started that lore. Unless it really was just like a homeless, I guess there was a person living in the woods that just had an obscene amount of body hair that was theoretically attacking other humans. I don't know. People do weird things.
Right.
But I don't know. It's interesting. But then you also have, like, have you ever heard of the study of cryptozoology?
Yes.
I also ran into this term when I was doing some research. So it's like, it's the study of like animals that probably don't exist, but like the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, dragons, things like that. It's like zoology, but for cryptids in a sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's like people that, you know, they try to legitimately study this. So there's got to be some kind of truth to it, but we don't have any DNA samples. That's the other thing I ran into. We have no DNA samples from this. We have some hair and fur that people claim they have, but nothing of substance where they're willing to turn it over to a lab to study it.
That right there tells me, I mean, if you're not willing to at least give a portion of it for them to actually analyze it, to be like, okay, cool, this was actually this, then you got nothing. You know, if you're not willing to turn any of that over, if you're not willing to do any of that to aid in that, because if I had some fur that I claim to be Bigfoot's fur, I would actually want to know if it actually is Bigfoot's fur. I wouldn't want to be the crazy guy in the small town that everyone's just like, don't listen to this guy, he just tells tall tales. But realistically, if I knew what I had, I would actually like to get it tested to find out if that's actually is what it is. But it's actually funny you mentioned the samples of the hair and stuff like that, because I was just Googling it just to see, but apparently the FBI actually did an investigation on it. They gave no confirmation at the very end of it, but this article was written back for 2019, but I think the research happened well before that. But they gave no confirmation, but they had hair, they had other random stuff, but just like every other government facility, they don't give you any confirmation for anything. They're just like, hey, like, we have this, we can neither confirm nor deny these, you know, findings or whatever, really. But
yeah, so think about, I didn't know that. I didn't know the FBI did a search on it, but imagine if they knew it was accurate or truth, right? What if internally they're like, yep, this thing exists, or it existed within the last 100 years or something like that? I could see there being a reason to kind of keep it hush-hush, because if you admit that to the public, you got to rewrite so much history and so much context of what it means to be a human, to like try to tell a group of people like, hey, there was this giant ape thing that wasn't a monkey walking around the forest, the Pacific Northwest, or wherever the heck they found the samples. Like, you can't just casually explain that to people. Right. People are going to have like mental breakdowns and not understand the world around them anymore. So I could see it being in their best interest that if they knew it to be true, just to kind of keep it under lock and key and just let life go on as people believe it to be so.
Yeah, that's true. But then you have your people like me that I'm like, I need to know. Like, I need that confirmation in my life that there is this 7 foot plus tall being that is just living his best life, you know? Like, just doing his own thing out there in the middle of whatever forest he's in or wherever geolocation that he's at. And who knows? It could be just like a mythical island out there that houses like all these beings that everyone talks about, or all these like, you know, cryptids and stuff like that. Like, there could be just an island, because, well, like I said, we haven't discovered everything yet. There could be an island out there somewhere that we don't even know about, that just, you got Bigfoot, you got the Loch Ness Monster, you got your just everything and anything, you know?
Well, I mean, it's a similar thing, I think, for like what I think the Loch Ness Monster might have been. If it was a real thing, it could have just been like one of the last few dinosaurs chilling out there that just happened to survive, you know, the amount of time. Like the structure, I forget. I want to say I remember reading that they confirmed that the photo, that like the famous photo of Nessie, like that's a fake photo or something. Mm-hmm. I forget if they like factually confirmed that or not. but there's so much folklore behind like people claiming to see it, just not having photographs of it, especially back before it was easy to have a camera, way before smartphones and Kodak. But I mean, I don't think it's hard to believe that there might have been the remnants of species that like cease to exist now. Like we have so many extinct species, which I just had a thought, not to go down a tangent, but do you remember like growing up, maybe let's go back to like middle school, high school. Wasn't it such commonplace to hear about all of these species going extinct, like actively on the extinction list? But you don't hear anything about that today. You don't hear any, like, I'm sure there definitely are some species factually on the extinction list just because nature happens the way it does. But you don't hear or feel the panic the way that you used to 15 years ago.
I think they probably just feel that a lot of people that I will also too. I mean, you really have to think about it. The like social media and all this other stuff's come out in such a huge roar now that I feel like a lot of it just ends up on social media. Like, oh, this thing is going extinct or whatever. Like they just put it as like a typical news, but they don't make it like a huge uproar like they used to. But now you have so many sanctuaries for endangered species that now I don't really think they feel the need to like put it out there. They're just like, okay, only the people that need to know if it's an endangered species know it's an endangered species, and they try to go rescue it or try to get the few of them that you can capture, for them to reproduce, which in my opinion, it's kind of like one of those things, like if you have the ability for like, the animals like on that list to obviously make more of them, then cool. Like, let's expand that population again. It's kind of not what's happening with like, if Bigfoot does exist, like, I mean, it's not the same thing again. I mean, if it does exist, or who knows, maybe the apes that we see now, like, your chimpanzees, your orangutans, your gorillas, maybe they were the descendant of what Bigfoot was.
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know. That's just me speculating because that's just something to the day for that.
A weird North American gorilla.
Yeah.
Now let's go back to your theory real quick about this lands that have not been discovered. One thing I think that's fun to think about is, so we have access to like Google Earth, Google Maps, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if there's land out there that is known to exist but has been erased from the database? You ever thought about that?
Yeah. I mean, that, it's funny enough that you say that. I mean, I don't have the actual Google Earth installed on my computer, but I was just getting on Google Maps, just kind of just looking around. If you want to pull yours up, we can kind of just go around.
The whole thing is you don't have to install Google Earth. Gone are the days of having to actually install it. But let me pull it up real quick.
Okay, I didn't know if you asked or not, but yeah, it's actually funny you said it though, because like, let's be honest, if Google is ran or regulated by a government entity, which
I think pretty sure it is,
and it is, they would have the ability to remove stuff from the photos, like the Google satellites, of what everything looks like on the Earth, essentially. Now, when you look, like, let's just say like the U.S., for example, you see Hawaii, then you see like New Zealand, and then you kind of zoom in and you kind of see like certain things, but there's no like.
Okay, so you said Hawaii, which is right here.
Yeah.
And you're talking about New Zealand, which is, oh Lord, where's New Zealand?
It's down right there. Right
there. Way down here.
Uh-huh. But when you look at it, you even just other like tiny little islands, like you don't see anything labeled for those islands, so we realistically can't tell like how big those islands exactly. Like we don't know how big that island actually is.
Are you saying like in like outside of this island could be a lot larger than what we're seeing here?
Well, no, like I'm just saying, it's like they don't. If you zoom out so far, you don't see it. Like you don't.
Oh, I understand.
There's no label there, so it's like there's so much out there that we don't know. That what if Bigfoot or what if any of these other entities actually do exist on these islands somewhere?
That's a good point. Like, what is this right here? Like, I don't even know what this is. Rapa Nui, Parque Yoshio now. The island of Pascua? What is this? What is this place?
Let's find out.
Oh, is this? Oh, this is Easter Island. Hold up. This is Easter Island.
Is that really?
Yeah, I feel like a dummy.
What a weird coincidence.
This is Easter Island. You know about Easter Island, right?
I've heard about it.
They have the Moai head.
Oh yeah, the head. It should be like over to your right. If you go to your right.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Here we go.
Okay.
Let me see if here we go. There's some Moai. Yeah, we don't know what happened to these people. We got some ideas, but they probably just. I remember one of the strong theories was they like chopped down all the trees. They couldn't.
Okay.
Do agriculture anymore, and they just ended up dying. But yeah, this is a wild place. I forgot about this. I was like, yeah, what is this little island out here? What are they hiding from us? Duh, it's Easter Island. It's out there, dude. I mean, it's out there.
Yeah. So it's like, what if there is stuff that's out there that actually isn't, discovered, or like, what if there's stuff out there that was discovered, but they're just like, hey, we're just gonna like block all this out from y'all to see it. Like, you're not allowed to see this because I want to ask about it, like certain areas, but it's like realistically, it's like, would they actually show those areas on the map?
I think this is a prime example of what you're trying to say right here. You can't see this whole thing. There's definitely areas that have been scrubbed over on this.
I mean, that is one, but there's another island that I don't know what the island looks like. If it's, let's see here.
Oh, like, of an example of like an island that.
Let's see.
Like, oh yeah, just to show you, like, look, the Pacific Northwest up here. This is like dense forest. It's like here's Seattle, Tacoma.
Yeah. So it's like there's definitely a lot of landmass. I mean, even look at Alaska. Like, I mean, all of Alaska hasn't been. There's not enough population in Alaska for all that to be inhabitable.
Oh, nowhere near. And it's just like frigid. It is frigid cold.
And so it's like a Yeti could exist up there, but you really just don't know.
Good point. Good point. It's so weird looking at the globe from this perspective. This is wild. Is this really? Am I tripping out right now? What's happening here? Okay, wait. Guys, the UK really like that. I never really pictured the UK being that far north. I'm so used to looking at a flat map.
Yeah.
It's up there.
And then you even have Iceland. Like, I don't know if what they've got over in Iceland.
Oh, Iceland's a dope place.
So it's like, just overall though, I mean, if you really think about Bigfoot, just all in all, I mean, the legend is the legend. I mean,
yes.
that is what it is. But people have to realize that we live on a planet where new discoveries for things are happening every day. And although Bigfoot might not be a new discovery, but I would lean in to say that if he is out there, it's probably an area that we don't know. It's probably an area that we have discovered and that he just might be chilling out there, or it might be an area that we haven't discovered that, people just are just now convinced like, oh, he doesn't exist or it doesn't exist. But if it did actually exist and not today's time, then it would be, I would say probably be somewhere on some distant land, or if it did exist at one point in time, it existed in our own country or another country of origin, and just everyone just has their own, not theory, what are those those campfire tales?
Oh, just like oral traditions or folklore, like.
Oh, yeah, so like they come up with like their own story about what it is, but realistically, only one country actually has what the real version of it actually is out there. So.
And let me throw you a curveball. One of the wacky theories that, I'll be honest, I don't understand where it came from, but one of the wacky theories I saw was It's a time traveler. It can hop in and out of these time portals and just bloop, 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 hop around. What's your take on that? Is it horseshit?
Well, I mean, we talked about a Wendigo last week, and we actually had some pretty compelling evidence about that, about it. I mean, who knows? It might not be a time traveler, but who knows? Maybe anything that's like paranormal or anything that's like not of this world or anything that just isn't normal in today's society. Maybe it has the ability to go into whatever dimension that those beings have the ability to go into. But as far as the time traveling Bigfoot, I mean, what if it's like a smart Bigfoot, like it has it developed time travel, like it was like from the Planet of the Apes kind of thing, and it developed time travel.
Okay, this theory might be a bit of a stretch, but what if, so Bigfoot really was, it exists. It graduated summa cum laude from Yale University, let's say, 1947, kind of smart. Maybe it did a residency at MIT shortly thereafter, developed time travel, went back in time to experience what the North American continent was at some point. It really wanted to get first dibs on land in Seattle before the rest of America migrated west, because they knew Seattle was going to become a tech hub. They try to get some land while they're out there speculating land. They get lost, so then they have to live in the woods. They don't know where their time machine was. And in that process, they ate some wild foliage, which then caused their body hair to profusely overgrow. And then Native American tribes came across them. This guy had already been stranded so long out in the middle of nowhere, he forgot his own language. Could have been, 20 years by himself out in the woods. And that's how the Bigfoot myth came to be. Not like I thought that all off the top of my head without all of the plot holes that you can poke out there, but plausible, right?
Yeah, that is definitely plausible. How big was this guy? Was he a large man?
Well, what I didn't tell you in part of the story was he was actually the starting center for the Yale basketball team. However, what I also didn't tell you on top of that was, in my timeline, basketball didn't exist as a sport yet, but because he was a time traveler, the first thing he did, he actually went in the future. And he actually did a short stint at Kansas University when basketball was really coming to fruition. And so he actually brought the early concept of basketball back in time to Yale for a short period. People thought he was crazy because they're like, yo, you want to use a ball and a what? They're like, huh? That makes no sense. And so that's actually what angered him to say, you know what? I'm going to go make my millions, and I'm going to go back in time and grab some land in Seattle, Washington.
I like it. I like the story. That's the origin of Bigfoot. That's what we're sticking with. You heard it here first on Unscripted Company. That's exactly how Bigfoot actually became known. So don't believe the Native American Western civilization culture folklore that they tell you. This is exactly how it happened. But no, I mean, I guess that kind of tells, about what it is. I mean, you have to really think, though, when you look at just the history of it all, no one can really tell. No one can, unless you're a scientist, no one can kind of go in on oh, this is why Bigfoot actually exists. I mean, we're not scientists. We're just a couple guys hanging out on a Sunday evening and talking about Bigfoot,
I self-identify as a scientist, for the record. I self-identify, but
it is 2024. That is your right to do so, sir. But as far as films, movies, YouTube videos, I mean, obviously movies, take it with a grain of salt, even if it's your documentary type movies where it's a person and holding a camera that's shaking the whole entire time, so you can't get an actual visual of what's going on because they're running away from something that's chasing them. That's probably Bigfoot. But there are videos out there. I mean, if you're young and, obviously you've browsed on YouTube, but if you haven't browsed down that rabbit hole, I encourage you to do so. Rabbit holes are fun. It can kind of get you thinking, and, You can develop your own theory about what you think Bigfoot actually is, or if Bigfoot still exists today. That is the question. Does Bigfoot still exist today?
So if you made it to this part of the podcast, we have what we like to call the company policy. So it's assuming if you made it about 50 plus minutes in, you might be intrigued by what we're talking about. But what we want to ask from you is, whether you're listening on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you're listening or watching to this, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, leave us a comment. Let us know, do you think, first of all, do you even think Bigfoot exists? If you do, why? What do you think it even is? Do you think it's Gigantopithecus? Do you think it's a Yale time-traveling basketball aficionado? Do you think it's, I don't know, did we have another even like theory out there of what it could have been? Like just the rare North American gorilla, which I guess is Gigantopithecus, but
I'll be honest, I got no other theories. 100% of what Bigfoot could be I don't know, it could be a person just wearing a hairy suit at the end of the day, just going out there and just playing jokes on everyone. He just travels the country just playing jokes on people.
I'm sure some of it could very well be that. I'm sure there are some legitimate like scenarios where people think they've seen something, and they probably have, but it's Joe Bob in Appalachia who had too much moonshine one night and was like, you know what? I'm going to put on my full body Bigfoot suit. I'm going to go run around the holler. And you know, someone saw him and thought they saw a demon or they saw Bigfoot.
Someone else that obviously had too much moonshine saw this man running and immediately was like, that's Bigfoot. And here we are today, probably 75 years later. And they're like, that's Bigfoot. That's exactly what Bigfoot is.
And with that, we'll see y'all in the next one.